It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred to the custody of the warden at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And further, on the 12th day of January, 1997, your body shall be subjected to shock by a sufficient current of electricity. May God have mercy upon you. Mr. Bates, take Mr. Pike into the door.
Can I please have my mom before I go?
Mr. Bates, please hold Ms. Pike in the dock.
Please, let me just love my mom.
Please hold Ms. Pike in the dock.
I love you. I love you too. And I love you too.
She doesn't look like someone about to be sentenced to death. She was 18 years old, sitting in a Knox County courtroom, small frame, long hair pulled back. Two defense attorneys on either side. The jury had already found her guilty of first-degree murder. Now everyone was waiting for one word: life. That's what her lawyers argued for. They told the jury she was young, mentally unstable, damaged, not beyond saving. For a moment it seemed possible, because this wasn't a career criminal. This was a teenager from a Job Corps campus in Knoxville, convicted of luring another young woman into the woods. The judge looked down at the sentencing order. No drama, no raised voice, just formal language. Then he read the finding: especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. That phrase changed the outcome, because under Tennessee law it opened the door to death. She thought she was facing life in prison. She was wrong. In less than a minute, Christa Pike became the youngest woman on death row in Tennessee, and what sealed that fate wasn't just what happened in those woods, it was what she said afterward. Tonight, you're going to see how her own words, recorded, preserved, replayed in court, helped send an 18-year-old to death row. One killing, one confession, one sentence that can't be undone. This case is drawn directly from the record: Knox County Criminal Court filings, sworn trial testimony, the published opinion of the Tennessee Supreme Court affirming the conviction and sentence, the recorded confession played for the jury, and the written sentencing findings identifying the statutory aggravating factors. No speculation, no anonymous sources, no reenactments presented as fact. Just what was said, what was documented, and what the court ultimately decided. Knoxville, Tennessee, January 12, 1995. All three were students at a Job Corps training program. All teenagers. That night, Colleen Slimmer left campus with Christa Pike and two others. They walked toward a wooded area near the University of Tennessee Agricultural campus. It wasn't far, close enough to feel familiar, far enough to be isolated. By the next morning, a passerby discovered a body in those woods. Colleen Slimmer was 19 years old. Within hours, investigators were questioning students from the Job Corps dorms. By the end of the day, Christa Pike was under arrest, and what she told detectives in the hours that followed would become one of the most important pieces of evidence the jury would ever hear. The defense never stood up and said this didn't happen. They couldn't. Instead, they told a different story. They told the jury she was 18, barely out of childhood. They presented testimony about her background, instability, abuse, mental health struggles. They argued she was emotionally disturbed, impulsive, immature, not calculating, not methodical, not someone capable of planning prolonged violence. They leaned into mitigation. They asked the jury to look at her age, look at her history, look at her psychological evaluations presented during sentencing. They did not deny she was there. They did not deny a killing occurred. They argued diminished capacity. They argued that whatever happened in those woods was driven by emotion, jealousy, immaturity, instability, not deliberate cruelty, not torture, not something deserving death. They asked for life imprisonment, and for a moment that narrative has weight, because she is 18, because she looks young, because death is permanent. But then the prosecution reminds the jury of something else, not rumor, not interpretation, her own voice, recorded, hours after Colleen Slimmer was killed, and that's when the tone in the courtroom changes. Before we go any further, if you value documented, courtroom-accurate true crime like this, take a second. Like the video. It tells the platform this kind of deep, fact-based reporting matters. And if you're new here, subscribe. Every case we cover is built from trial records, transcripts, and verified court documents, not speculation. Also, I'm always curious. Drop your location in the comments. City, state, country. It's powerful seeing how many different places tune in for these cases. Now, let's go back to that interrogation room, because this is where the direction of the trial really begins to shift. The prosecution's case turns sharply at one point. The recorded interview. Police questioning. A tape recorder turned on. Christa Pike speaks. The statement was given shortly after the killing and was later admitted into evidence at trial. Jurors heard it. In that recording, she describes the events in detail.
You know, it's harder to hurt somebody when they're talking to you and you have to see another person. Right. And I told her, shut up. And she was still breathing. I said, Colleen, do you know who's doing this to you? And she was just going, just talking like that, but I don't know what to say.
How the group went into the woods, what was said, what was used during the assault, who participated, the length of the attack. Prosecutors emphasized timing. This was not weeks later, not after months of preparation, not after trial strategy. It was given shortly after arrest. The argument to the jury, these were her words. Close in time to the crime, then the medical examiner testifies. Autopsy findings are presented: blunt force trauma, stab wounds, burn injuries, multiple mechanisms of injury. The prosecution argues that the physical findings are consistent with a prolonged assault rather than a single instantaneous act. And then one additional fact is introduced at trial. Investigators recovered a portion of the victim's skull. According to trial testimony, it was found in Pike's possession. That evidence was presented to the jury. For the prosecution, this becomes a critical reinforcement point. Statement, forensics, physical recovery, three categories aligning. The defense does not deny that the killing occurred. Instead, they focus on mitigation. Her age, 18 at the time of the offense. Mental health history, emotional instability, trauma background, immaturity. But this is where the tension crystallizes for the jury. On one side, a defense narrative of impulsivity and damaged youth. On the other, a recorded statement describing sustained violence and forensic evidence consistent with that description. That contrast becomes one of the central fault lines of the trial. Now the prosecution turns to motive. They argue this wasn't random, it wasn't spontaneous, it was jealousy. Multiple Job Corps students testified about tension between Christa Pike and Colleen Slimmer. Same campus, same dorm system, same social circle. Witnesses described hostility, arguments, threats. They told the jury Pike was angry over a romantic relationship involving a male student, not strangers crossing paths, peers living in close quarters. The prosecution uses those testimonies to build a picture. Possessive, resentful, focused on Colleen. They suggest this wasn't a sudden explosion. It was building. The defense pushes back. They call it teenage drama, exaggeration, dorm gossip blown out of proportion. They argue young. People argue all the time. That doesn't make them killers. But then the timeline comes back into focus. January 12, 1995. Colleen leaves campus with Pike and two others. They walk toward a wooded area near the University of Tennessee Agricultural Campus. This was not a crowded street, not a public cafeteria, not a spontaneous hallway confrontation. It was a movement away from safety, away from witnesses, into isolation. The prosecution argues that decision matters, because you don't end up in the woods by accident. You go there on purpose, and according to the state, that choice shows intent. Now, instead of describing it, Listen to what the jury heard. This is drawn from the recorded statement Christa Pike gave to investigators after her arrest. It was admitted into evidence at trial. No commentary, just her words.
What happened out there? We went down to the UT farm. Who went? Me, Colleen, and the others. Why? To talk? What happened when you got there? We started fighting. Who started it? I did. What did you do? I hit her with a piece of asphalt. Then what? We kept hitting her. Did anyone use a knife? Yes. Who? I did.
No raised voice in the recording. No panic. Just answers. Measured. Direct. This statement was admitted into evidence. The jury heard it. In full. And the defense had to argue mitigation, not innocence, in the face of her own recorded account. The prosecution doesn't stop with the confession. They bring in a co-defendant. Tatterall Shipp testified at trial. He was there that night. He took the stand, under oath, and his version of events placed Christa Pike at the center of the violence. He described the walk into the woods, the confrontation, the assault. He identified her as the primary aggressor, and crucially, his account aligned with the medical examiner's findings. Blunt force trauma, stab wounds, burn injuries, details that matched the physical evidence recovered from the scene. Now, the jury isn't just hearing her recorded statement, they're hearing a second voice, one that overlaps, one that reinforces key facts. This is the mirror effect in a courtroom, when your own version matches forensic evidence and another witness. The space for alternative explanations narrows. The defense attacks credibility. They point out Shipp faced charges of his own. They suggest motive to cooperate, to shift blame, to secure a better outcome. They question consistency. They question memory. They question incentive. But the alignment remains. Confession, forensics, co-defendant testimony, 3 separate lines of evidence, pointing in the same direction. And for the jury, that convergence matters. During the guilt phase, there is no dramatic collapse, no visible outburst. Reporters covering the trial described Christa Pike as composed in court. Still. Measured. She listened as witnesses testified, as the medical examiner described the injuries, as her recorded confession was played for the jury, and when the verdict came back, guilty of first-degree murder, there was no immediate explosion, no chaos in the courtroom, just procedure. Because guilt was only the first step. What followed was the penalty phase, and that's where the tension shifts, because now the jury is not deciding what happened. They're deciding punishment, life or death. The prosecution argues aggravating factors under Tennessee law, specifically that the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. That phrase isn't emotional, it's statutory. It has a legal definition. But when it's read aloud in a courtroom, it lands heavy, clinical, formal, final. If the jury finds that aggravating factor and determines it outweighs mitigation, the death penalty becomes legally available. That's the threshold. That's the door. And in this case, the jury found it. Which means the next words spoken in that courtroom would carry permanent weight. The sentencing hearing is procedural, structured, deliberate. The jury returns its recommendation: death. Under Tennessee law at the time, that recommendation carries decisive weight. The court reviews the findings. The aggravating factor, that the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, has been established. The judge speaks in formal language, measured, legal. The defendant is sentenced to death, not life imprisonment. Death. According to courtroom reporting, this is when visible emotion surfaces. Audible distress is noted. The composure observed earlier does not hold in the same way at sentencing. The reality shifts in that moment. An 18-year-old defendant becomes a condemned prisoner under state law. The defense had presented mitigating evidence: age, mental health history, trauma, immaturity. But the jury determined the aggravating factor outweighed mitigation. The sentence moves forward automatically into appellate review as required in capital cases. The Tennessee Supreme Court later affirms the conviction and the death sentence. Post-conviction proceedings follow. Appeals are filed. Relief is denied. As of the present, Christa Pike remains on death row in Tennessee. January 1995. According to trial evidence, Christa Pike arranged for the victim to leave the Job Corps campus and walk into a wooded area in Knox County. A prolonged assault occurred. Medical testimony documented blunt force trauma, stab wounds, and burn injuries. Hours later, Pike gave a recorded statement to investigators. That statement was admitted into evidence at trial. Prosecutors argued it contained details that aligned with the physical findings at the scene. A co-defendant's testimony also aligned with key forensic elements. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, jurors found the statutory aggravating factor that the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. They determined that aggravation outweighed mitigation. A sentence of death was imposed. Mandatory appellate review followed. The Tennessee Supreme Court affirmed the conviction and sentence. Subsequent appeals and post-conviction petitions were denied. She remains incarcerated on Tennessee's death row. At trial, the recorded statement she gave shortly after the killing became a central piece of evidence. Prosecutors relied on it heavily. The jury heard it in full before returning its verdict. She was 18 years old at the time of the offense. She has now spent decades incarcerated while the legal status of her sentence continues through the appellate and execution review process. She was 18 years old when she entered those woods. She has spent decades on death row since the sentence was imposed, and the legal process continues.
I know as a judge I'm not supposed to show emotion. And in 22 years, I never have. This is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life.
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution. May God have mercy upon you.
If you value fact-based courtroom breakdowns, grounded in transcripts, appellate opinions, and verified records, support this work. Like the video so more viewers see evidence over speculation. Subscribe if you want full trial reconstructions, interrogation analysis, and sentencing deep dives built strictly from the record. And if you're watching from outside Tennessee or outside the United States, drop your location in the comments. These cases may be local in origin, but the legal questions, confession evidence, aggravating factors, capital punishment, reach far beyond one courtroom. More documented cases coming next.